paper that was published out of Stanford University that is just abbreviated as the DIAMOND study in 2017. They found that using a CGM allowed individuals to see hidden glucose spikes. So responding with a high glycemic load or blood glucose response, even when it was unexpected based on what they were eating. So this plays a little bit into following up somewhat, although albeit with less precision compared to the study out of Israel. But nevertheless, they note that those with the visible glucose spikes could identify and modify the foods they were eating or the habits that triggered them, demonstrating once again that CGMs are valuable beyond just traditional use in diabetes, just the explicit measurement of glucose in order to understand how much insulin needs to be injected. Now, I'd alluded in the introduction to the fact that CGMs also have a tremendous clinical use. Everything I just described is their use in an individual wanting to gain insight into their unique metabolic responses to food. I believe that insight is tremendously valuable. And that alone, I think, justifies the widespread use of CGMs. But I do want to go a little more clinical. So just by way of setting the background and relevance of this, about 1 in 3 Americans has prediabetes. In fact, I would suggest that it's even higher than that. But the vast majority, estimated that up to 80% of them don't know. Now, that's separate. That's just prediabetes. There are many people, of course, as well, who have actually full-blown type 2 diabetes, but don't know it because they haven't gotten tested for it. All right, now, CGMs, in this case, can be very helpful at catching these conditions early because they reveal the glucose patterns that would go otherwise unnoticed. All right. So one paper of 2 that I'm going to highlight again, just to keep things balanced and for the sake of time. This paper was published just a few years ago out of the Scripps Research Translational Institute. So this had 300 people using CGMs, and the research group found that nearly 15% showed glucose patterns consistent with prediabetes or outright type 2 diabetes, even though they had not ever been told and had never been diagnosed. So 15% of these subjects in this study actually had a diagnosis at the end of the study based strictly on the use of the CGM. So clear evidence that a CGM has tremendous value as a screening tool for people who are at risk but don't know it. Indeed, at sufficient risk that they actually have the problem. Also, the famous Framingham Heart Study, which has gone on for a tremendously long period of time, several decades now, just a few years ago, had a sub-study that used CGM in about 2,000 participants. And so they had these participants that were classified as healthy based on the conventional metrics, but they once again showed patterns indicating undiagnosed prediabetes. So this was a very large, famous study, once again showing the same thing. Early findings suggesting here that the CGMs are detecting these irregularities, allowing the person to make some changes or have a clinical intervention to prevent them from getting worse. Now, traditionally, people are often only relying on annual glucose tests. That's just measuring fasting glucose or A1C levels. But again, that's just a single snapshot. And moreover, it is possible for someone to kind of prep for those kinds of annual tests if they're even going in annually. And let's admit it, most people aren't going in for an annual wellness visit. But the CGM, by allowing the individual to have some insight into their dynamic response, so what's happening when they actually are eating something, that provides much more insight than you can get from just a singular snapshot of a fasting glucose.